late. And I was on vacation last week and it's just been head under the water all day today. And so actually I forgot my notebook and everything with all my other notes in it, so I'm just gonna talk off of the computer. And so I believe I was trying to remember exactly where we had left off. I thought it was right around, if we got very far into the residential zoning at all. I think it was the ag zone that we had left off on. And so I thought we could at least try to bang our way through as much of residential zoning as we can and talk about that in general and what your current rules say, and then maybe if there's something that we need to be adding that we don't think that we have considered, I'll just be taking some notes as we go. So just to have everybody's memory, we're going to talk about the R1 zone, which is primarily, hopefully you're not colorblind, but this yellow area of the community is zoned R1. These orange areas are R2, and then we do have an R3 zone right here. And the R1 zone is primarily what we call a single-family residential district. We are encouraging site-built single-family dwellings to be in this specific zone. We do have a few types of permitted uses. In addition to site-built single-family homes, we have modular homes. And if you remember from last month, we talked about modular home is that off-site constructed home that doesn't have wheels or a chassis or anything that goes along with it. So if I wanted to have a lumberyard house, we'll have you brought in off-site. We also have public and parochial schools, parks and recs, and public buildings or facilities owned and operated by the government. So those are the things that we would allow carte blanche. You meet your minimum setbacks, minimum lot area, in that yellow area of town, and you're good to go, right? So then let's just talk then permitted accessory uses. Again, if we read those things that we would see normally incidental to any of those residential type uses. Here we have accessory uses and structures customarily incidental except stables. Now, I'm not advocating this next line. Some communities allow for the raising of poultry in the backyards. Some communities don't. And so I didn't know where you guys were at.
We have an ordinance that allows 6 hens.
6 hens.
Yeah.
Okay. And that ordinance was that added on as your zoning regulations?
No,
It's just a standalone ordinance?
it's an ordinance in her book.
Okay, what we wanted to do with that then, would you send me a copy of chicken ordinance? And what we're gonna wanna do is, that to me is more of a land use, and in your zoning regulations, it stipulates right now that you don't allow animals in residential zones in your current zoning rules, and you do allow them through your normal community ordinances, but your zoning regulation says the most restrictive shall govern. So that ordinance is not even an effective ordinance in conflict with what you have here. So if that is still the whim and will of the community, I would just as soon morph that into the zoning regulations, and then we would get rid of that ordinance altogether, but put it as a land use, because that's what you're talking about here. And so I'm not gonna argue from an attorney standpoint one way or the other whether it's legal or not. It's conflicting with what your existing rules say.
So we have, to me it doesn't make sense, we've got a dog ordinance that's in our general ordinance book. That's different than poultry?
Does your dog ordinance talk about kennels and the permitting of those?
So, but I don't know that we permit it, and I don't remember.
Send me all your animal ordinances, because you just have to remember, you have a section in your zoning ordinance that says the most restrictive ordinance supersedes the other ones. And if in your zoning ordinance it says right now there's no animals in a residential zone, except you have a separate ordinance over here that says there is, that ordinance doesn't apply because your zoning ordinance is more restrictive. And so, I'm not saying I don't care if you have chickens or not, I just wanna make sure that we don't get dragged into court. And one guy says, well, why, I don't want my neighbor's chickens to be there, and I'm gonna ask for a writ of mandamus for you to enforce your zoning ordinance, which says chickens aren't allowed. I don't care what the other ordinance says, zoning says it's not allowed. So, chicken ordinance and dogs and lions and bears.
Oh my.
Oh my. All right, so let's go back now. Let's just talk about the chicken ordinance. And I since I haven't seen it, so it's 6 chickens, hens, have to be in a contained or can they free range?
No, they have to have in a fence, and have to have so much square footage per bird.
Okay. How many of those types of operations do you have in town right now?
Two,
Is
that I
there?
know
Yeah. So is there a neighbor sign off that needs to be
of.
required?
They have to be so many feet from their neighbor or
From their
whatever
neighbor.
for the ordinance, yeah.
And then, okay, any issues, any problems, anybody complaining about that? Okay, wanna keep it?
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm just gonna make a little note. Consistent with chicken ordinance.
Should we name that raising of chickens, eliminate the poultry? Or would that include ducks and all that?
No, we just want chicken.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
That's why I said should we just put that,
I won't, I know what, I think I understand, I'll make the vernacular correct, but we're saying, we're not, except stables, which does not include pens for the raising of chickens, and then we'll defer, and we'll put, in our supplemental section, we'll just add that ordinance that you have on chickens, so it's consistent, and that way, and then when we adopt this, we'll make, an ordinance will then be to repeal that other section of your municipal code.
Okay, so we'll remove that from our municipal
We'll
code.
take that out of your municipal code and we'll have it replaced in our zoning ordinance because, again, I'm one for cleaning up municipal codes as much as possible so that we don't have conflicting rules.
Right,
And I don't provide that service, but when I come across it, I try to fix what I can.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so those are, okay, that was a good conversation to have. Because it's very divisive in some places. In some communities, it's been very divisive. All right, so the following uses for conditional use, right now we've got lodging, boarding houses, or bed and breakfast establishments. I'm not exactly sure, a lodging or boarding house is not really adequately defined very well, and how I think of a lodging house is just somebody coming in and renting a room for a night. Or maybe a 6 or 7 day or a short extended type of a thing, or bed and breakfasts. Well, what I think you need to do is make sure that you have standards in your bed and breakfasts. You do define in your definitions that's for nothing more than 14-day stays. And so lodging and boarding houses is kind of ancient vernacular and zoning jargon. We just don't use it. And so I would recommend just eliminating it, have a bed and breakfast establishment, and then that established by chapter 4.19, there's nothing new there, it's just referencing your existing rules or existing definitions. I just pulled it out of the definition and put it into your supplemental regulations. So if I was just to go to 4.19, there. So basically, it's green in here because it's your existing language just moved to a different place in your ordinance. And so bed and breakfasts is 1,800 square feet of floor space, have to be in compliance with the state laws, registration with South Dakota Department of Health, guest list, smoke detectors. It's an accessory use, you can have a small sign. It's incidental to the owner-occupied principal dwelling. Not more than 4 bedrooms in the place is used for such a purposes. You have to abide by off-street parking, and the length of stay shall not be more than 14 days in a 120-day period. The only meals served would be breakfast, a common facility, and then you have to meet all building codes and zoning requirements associated with that. And that's what your curb rules are. If you don't have any issues, I don't know if you have any bed and breakfasts in town right now. Would you say you had any boarding houses in town right now?
no.
So to me, I think we can probably maintain, the only thing here is the only substantive differences between a boarding house and a bed and breakfast is that the bed and breakfast is an owner occupied structure. If I wanted to come in and buy a building over here in the R1 zone, turning into a boarding house, I don't have to live there. And I'm not saying, is that something that you want as a community? And that's why most communities are going away, because they don't like the aspect of the fluid transition of people moving in and out of a single family neighborhood where people are coming and going and coming and going. And if you don't care, we can leave it in, but that would be the difference. Keep it, leave it,
I don't think we want.
take it out.
Yeah.
In the R1, this is in that yellow area of the community. Maybe it's more appropriate in an R2 or an R3 zone, I'm not sure, but that's really a community standard. So I'm gonna leave it as I've got for now.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to where I was. All right, kind of just changed the vernacular here. We just have utility substations and, I'll double check what we said here. Public buildings, all right, so public buildings is fine, but when we talk about a public utility, I think I maybe would recommend changing that a little bit. I think we were saying governmental buildings are okay, but do we want to say things such as radio and television transmitters or, water filtration plants or a storage reservoir? Those are public uses. Do you see them being something that would just permitted automatically in an R1 zone, or would you rather have some oversight to that? Or what kind of public buildings and public facilities are okay without a special hearing, and which ones are not? I mean, a library, probably nobody has a problem with a library, or a museum in an R1 zone. Probably some people probably don't even have a problem with a small substation or a water tower. But what about, a 200-foot cell tower?
Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's other places for them inside than our R1 districts. I mean, as far as any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We have one right behind an R1, and I've heard complaints about that one.
Right.
It's in a commercial.
It's in a commercial area.
It's in a commercial zone though.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe I just need to look at utilities versus public buildings now, because that could be broad enough to say that the highway shop or the maintenance shop could be in an R1 zone. That's
Yeah.
probably, yeah. Intrusive. These are my own notes, so I don't know what that means. Home occupations is a listed use, not proposing any changes there, provided they meet the requirements of chapter 4.18. And you'll say, what is that, Todd? And, well, this, again, most of this is your existing language. So you can think of that home occupation as that business that's going on in the confines of the home. It's not in the garage or in the back shed, or this is happening inside the home. And it's done by those people living. I don't have employees coming in, right? And everybody has to be related. That's in the home occupation, right? And we could have 25% of, only 25% of the floor area can be used. The exception, and this is new language, what I'd recommend doing is that if I got a home daycare, well, my wife, that's what she does for a living, she has a home daycare. I can tell you we use more than 25% of our house with those rugrats running around all the time, right? And so that's probably more of, in reality, I know that's something that you probably would want to, you don't want to ding somebody because they're using 35% or half the house for daycare. Your current rules say there's no change from the outside appearance. You really don't even notice that there's a business going on there, except for maybe a little sign that says, Todd's Music Lessons or tanning beds or whatever. No equipment or processes should be used in the home occupation which creates noise, dust. You can read, I'm not gonna have to do that. No extra traffic. Notwithstanding any operation that cares for more than 12 children in a 24-hour period shall not be considered a home occupation. I'm gonna move number 6. 4.1, just include that in the definitions because that's more of a definition. So what we're saying there is that if I've got more than 12 kids, that's, wow, that can happen, I mean, because if it's more than 12 kids, if you're state licensed, you really can't have more than 12 kids without having another person working for you. So then it becomes more of what I would call a daycare center type of thing. So we're saying as a home occupation, if I'm raising less than kids, whether I'm certified by the state or not, that's a home occupation. It gets bigger than 12, it's becoming, it's more of a business than it is a home occupation. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And now if there's anything that you think that we're not hitting the bells and whistles, or if we're coming up short on, or we want to add something, this is the time that you just kind of let me know. Also now in the R1, as a conditional use, I can have a 2-family dwelling. That can be a townhouse, it could be a condo type of a situation, it could be just your standard old duplex. It could be an old single-family house that's been converted into a duplex internally. That would be an allowable use as a conditional use. Hospitals and nursing homes, any building proof that shall be set back not less than 50 feet from the street. There, we're saying that those are okay, but we're gonna have a little bit extra setback than we would know for other uses. Licensed commercial daycare facilities, now that's where I'm talking about that over 12, that we could allow that in residential, because that's generally where you see daycare facilities lots of times. But here, that would be a conditional use if we have more than 12 kids, right? Now here's one that you don't have in your ordinance, and this is completely a community character issue, is commercial storage buildings. Used exclusively for storage and not performance of any other services, commercial storage buildings will be building, siding, roofing materials comparable to that if it's in a residential structure in that district. Everybody and their dog seems to have more toys than they know what to do with, right? And most of them want them close to where they have. Lots of times they don't have the ability or enough land within their own lot to have a big enough garage, nor sometimes there's covenants that restricts the size of a garage on a specific lot. So what you're seeing is people constructing commercial storage buildings, and they're being plopped up in residential zones. Some residential zones, maybe it's more okay. This one here, I'm just throwing it out for discussion. If we were to allow that to happen, what would they look like? Well, they wouldn't be tin panel buildings. You'd have, they'd have to be lap siding or brick or something that would fit into the other homes in the residential zone. In this example, the first question is, do you want to allow commercial storage, what I call mini storage buildings, in an R1 zone, or an R2 and R3?
We've already allowed that.
Well, your ordinance doesn't allow for it right now.
Where do we allow that?
Well, then wouldn't you consider Jensen's place, because it's 10? So
Yeah,
Is that in an R1 zone?
Yeah,
Is it R1? I don't know. What
I'm
about
not sure.
John Gulch's? Isn't his 10 too?
that's back in,
That's
that's commercial property.
That's
back in-
commercially zoned, that's up here, isn't it?
No, it's not.
This area here?
It's not that. They're in orange. Well, at least the one is.
Yeah, that
And
one.
they're
This is the-
actual
that-
storage units
that's
that
a-
No,
people
not, no,
Right.
I'm not
rent.
talking
Not that
about
far
him.
out. Right next to it though.
Right.
The orange.
Right
The
south of
orange.
that.
Okay, that's in the R2
And one's in
zone.
the yellow, though, because Jensen's across the street from him.
Jensen's on Cornell, yeah.
Well, short story is, it's an illegal use in the R1 right now, so you're going to, well, if you want it, it's non-conforming.
It has to be
But-
grandfathered.
Are you saying like a place where we can go, like multiple storage
No,
units
no,
where I can go and
personal.
rent one, or are you
Personal.
talking
I'm talking-
personal?
No.
He's talking commercial.
I'm talking about
Yeah.
a commercial storage facility where you go rent
Oh.
space.
We don't
Well,
want
Yes,
yeah,
it
they're
is.
garages, but they're
He's
also.
talking like a business where you rent out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't want that in our R1s, do we?
Okay.
We have enough
Yeah.
room in our commercial area to allow that.
Okay,
Right.
well, let's go back, I got a couple questions.
That's what I thought he was talking about.
Well, that's what I thought, it had to go, if you're building, I mean, it can't be a pole shed, it has to conform to.
That's what we're
what
saying, if I
everybody
wanted
else
to
is,
build
so-
something where it doesn't have tin, you know, I can still have a garage, the little mini garage doors on it, but it'd have to be like lap siding, asphalt shingles, you know, brick frontage or whatever that you want, you know, to,
Okay, now, you know, they're going to steel on the roofs of these houses.
well, I mean, I'm just saying,
I mean-
whatever, what's in the neighborhood, I'm just saying, if there's no steel roofs in the neighborhood, I'm gonna
Right.
put it on right next door to them, then that's not comparable to what's in your neighborhood.
Okay,
It's different between residential use and then commercial use.
I know, but, okay, I wanted to make sure I understand. I'm saying,
You got
if
everybody.
I wanted to go and build a 6-unit commercial storage building in the R1 zone, no matter what it looks like, you don't want it.
No,
What about the R2 zone?
no,
What about the R3 zone?
no.
Now, the reason I say the R3 is because manufactured home trailer park districts, sometimes they need more storage space because they don't have.
Well, if it wasn't in the middle of town, maybe, but it is, so I wouldn't want it there.
Okay, I've heard one, I haven't heard anybody else say anything about the R3.
Can I see R3?
Yeah, our R3 is just that little spot where all the
Just
trailers
right
are,
here.
right?
Right
the
there.
trailer court,
Let's just say God came in and smited out this property here, and they decided to rezone the rest of this R2 and expand the trailer court and then put in some commercial storage facilities primarily catered to those people that are living in the trailer court. Would you be objectionable to that?
yeah, I would object.
Well, that's all I need to know, because if that's the case, then I'm gonna take that out then. Storage and,
Isn't that what's, do you consider what's behind St. Mary's, that part?
That.
But they're garages, right, technically?
But they can rent them out to people that don't have apartments, right?
Yeah,
I don't know, can they?
I think they
Yeah.
do.
yeah, they do, cause I rent one.
Yeah, they do.
okay,
So
so
we
you do
already
have a
have that
commercial, you
going
have
on.
a
They're,
commercial.
yeah,
But they've been,
they've,
Again, I don't care if they've been there
They've
forever
been
and a
there
day, the
forever.
question is, but they're non-conforming, if that's what they're doing, and if that came
they're
in.
asphalt shingles and, basically they
And
match
that's,
and,
and that part of town is zoned R1.
yeah.
no, I
It's
think it's
R2.
R2.
Over here?
It's by the park,
Yep,
down by the park, no,
North.
go north,
north,
And
North and
north,
right.
north and east.
east, yep,
There you
right
go.
there.
Down,
Right in there,
down, north
No.
some more, one more block, right
Right
there.
there.
That's
Right.
R2, so that's R2.
that's where they're at, this
They're next to an apartment building.
They're next to that apartment.
Okay, so we're not totally objectionable then to allowing storage facilities that are rented out on a commercial basis as long as they have siding and roofing materials similar to what's going in there. So what's the answer then? Not in the R1, but the R2 is okay? And if it's okay in the R2, would it be okay in the R3?
I think a lot,
I'm just being the devil's advocate here.
I think a lot is just gonna need to be grandfathered in and move forward.
Okay, let's stop and let's talk about that. What does that mean, grandfathered and moved in? Tell me what you think that means.
Means
Grandfather,
that if it's there now, you don't, it's fine, but to move it forward, you can't. I
right,
mean, I don't know when those were built.
What comes in if the damn thing burns down, am I allowed to rebuild it?
I think the way it's stated now, it's
Within a
10%.
year. Most
isn't
of it's
it?
been within a year, I think something like that.
The
Yeah,
answer's no.
Oh,
As I say, you can only do,
You can only build what conforms with the district. If all of a sudden I don't rent one of those units out for a year, can I rent another, can I start again? Answer's
I mean, that one particular one, not the whole.
no. Yeah,
Mm.
and how would we ever know that though?
well, I don't know. I'm just saying.
I mean, how would
Neighbor,
we-
somebody, this non-conforming and grandfathered there's kind of, doesn't mean that it's okay for now, is what that means. It also means that if, let's just say, I've got 5 units there right now, and I've got rooms to add 2 more units on, I can't add any more units on because I can't expand a non-conforming use, right?
Yep.
So if you have these instances in there, and we're okay with saying that zoning is prescriptive, looking towards the future, not looking in the past at the sins of our fathers, right? They're good to go, but God, we just pray there isn't a disaster. Because the first time that happens, and it does, whether through wind or locusts, whatever, you're gonna have to be dealing with that, and they're gonna come in for a building permit, and Susan's gonna have to say, sorry, Charlie, you can't do it. And then they're gonna be screaming bloody murder. And so then the question becomes, well, if it's okay for Joe, who was doing it 10 years before zoning, why can't Bob do it in a very similar circumstance in another part of town that's zoned the same? And again, I'm not advocating one position or the other, I'm just stating the obvious.
Wouldn't that have to, the person, if it's grandfathered, then they would be told it's grandfathered within this and this and this. If there's a natural disaster, you have to rebuild to the so on and so forth. Would that would cover it?
Well, you just wouldn't be able to rebuild because it's not an allowable use.
No, I mean, the rebuild to where the specifications. If we totally take it out, they can't rebuild.
Right. And right now, that's not even in your ordinance, and so that's the peculiar thing. We've allowed some of these things to happen either because they were there prior to the advent of zoning, or we just actually gave them permits, not realizing that we didn't have the authority to give them permits. And again, and no one's bitching, it's probably not a big deal. But I'm sorry, along comes a spider every once in a while.
I think that was done before I even got involved,
Yeah.
in '97.
And I'm sure I might have even had this conversation back when we did this 20 years ago too. And I to be honest, I can't remember what the outcome was. So obviously, I might have changed my tune since then too. That happens. And so the question still gets back to the idea. I think it's probably completely adequate to say that if we don't have any commercial storage units in the R1, and we want to say they're out, they're fine. Let's not include them. If we have one in the R2, we either just have to decide that we're okay with it as it is right now, but to put them on notice that if and when you want to add on or rebuild after a catastrophe, the answer is no. Now, I can reshingle it, I can put new siding, I can put new windows in it, all those types of things, not a big deal. But if God comes in and says, yeah, not today, they don't get to rebuild.
Well, if our R2 is an apartment area,
No, it's not all apartments.
no, but that's
No.
permissible in that area. Being a person that's lived in an apartment before, I liked my garage. That's where I parked my car. I kept my extra stuff there. I think it should be okay.
But that's a garage. If it's only for the people of the apartment, that's fine.
But none
But
of
they
them
rent
are.
out those apparently to non-apartment dwelling people.
Well, because not every apartment takes it. So, like, when I lived in an apartment in Brookings, you could pay an extra amount of money onto your rent, and then if you don't, then they just have it sitting empty. They're gonna want their monies out of it versus paying the
They're gonna do
property.
what they're gonna do.
Yeah, to get their bottom dollar. I think it's
That's
okay.
why.
Okay, so let's go back to another thing I heard earlier, and I just wanna make sure I understand, how it plays out in the community today. Are there areas or lots in town where somebody has a garage on R1, R2, R3 property where there is not a residence associated with that garage?
There's one or two.
There is.
There's a couple of those. So were they there long before the advent of zoning?
Oh, yeah, probably
One of them was for sure.
I'd say 30, 40 years.
So in that situation, those are non-conforming uses today as well, because we don't allow an accessory use, i.e. garage, to be going on in an R1 zone or any residential zone without a principal use.
You say like all those ones out there on by the storage, south of the storage units?
South of the storage.
How,
Kramer.
Yeah.
they're within, aren't they within the purple?
They're not actually.
No, it's like.
They're in R2 there. No, they're not, they're, yeah, they are R2.
Where does the line cut off?
The purple would be
Can you zoom on that?
John Knutson's, the big area there.
Oh, hang on, sorry. You can kind of see it right
John
there.
Knutson has the
Are these the
purple.
garages here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're on that side of that
Yeah,
that one right there,
this one here.
yeah. That's where,
So,
Kramer's building and 2 buildings are there.
And Henry's.
Henry's is in the purple up
I
there.
was
those
just
are
gonna
older,
say
or those are newer?
Henry's is up in that purple.
I have no idea
Oh,
what
there
Kramer
it is.
built his.
Oh, they're,
That's been there.
Long time ago.
no, the pole building, how old would that pole building be? That's probably been within the last 20 years.
Well, and that's good to know, and I'm not saying that we have to make up our minds how you wanna handle it, but it is a use, and we're doing, I believe I've got interns coming out here once school starts here in August to do a land use survey. And once that land use survey gets done, then we'll compare that land use survey to some of your actual uses, so I can find out what truly is non-conforming and what isn't, but again, that's why I wanted to have it.
And then where your arrow is there, right to the right of that where it was at, there is a building that got built when John built that
4 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, but he had a residence right there.
No, that's not rented, that's his own, on his own property.
But he's got a house
He's
there.
got
He has a house on that
Yeah,
property.
yeah,
Right in
that's
front
fine,
of it.
that's fine, yeah.
John who?
John,
Both is.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Okay, all right, so, I'm just gonna make a couple notes here for myself.
we've got a young guy that had a 40 by 75 lot that he bought. He wanted to put a garage on that,
I think I
Told him
know,
not.
and we told him no.
I think we had had this conversation a while, was that one you'd called me about, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
The new ones over with the.
No.
Ooh.
Mhm.
Okay. I just think about that a little bit, because that's something we'll come back to it. All right, so, all the uses that we just got done talking about, whether they be conditional or permitted, are the uses that, we are allowing in the R1. Is there anything else that we can think of in that R1 area that we need to think about allowing as either permitted or conditional use? Because if they're not listed, they're prohibited. Anything else jumps out to you as you're thinking about, that part of town in the yellow?
Do you have anything off the top of your head that comes to mind?
I was just looking off the old land use maps that are 12, 13 years old. I didn't see anything that jumped out of the old, but I know there's been new things that have happened, and until I get see that land use, that would be the only thing, but I'm gonna guess it's probably not an issue. And most of these things that I'm seeing in the R1 are very standard uses. The R1 is your most restrictive residential zoning district. It's the one where, there's not a lot of, it's more of a use district, not and a density district both, but, again, the biggest things that we're seeing in some of these things are these things about garages and figuring out how you wanted to handle that. But we can move on. What I did here is, I didn't really change much of anything, I just took the area regulations, and instead of having them written out, I put them in a table format, which talks about, right now, your minimum lot width is 50 feet, 30% coverage, your 2-family dwelling is 5,000. Anything that's a conditional use is actually at the druthers of the board, as far as what those minimum lot areas and lot widths, that's basically gonna be subject to what you guys think is the appropriate use. And so, nothing, I'm sorry.
When you say lot coverage, is that just house, garage, structure, not concrete?
We don't usually consider concrete because unless you are planning on some sort of stormwater drainage ordinance, and some communities do that, then they take all impervious surfaces and add that up. But most small communities, because they don't have a centralized stormwater system, and they use the ditches for the conveyance of stormwater, they don't. They usually are just thinking of the physical above ground structures, not thinking of the flat work. And now if you want to, we can just include that into what lot coverage means, but right now lot coverage is just primarily the buildings.
I think we talked about that last meeting,
Mhm.
we just decided the structure.
We were talking about whether or not a building permit
Had
is
to be,
required.
Yeah, we talked about whether or not it's required, and I don't think we're requiring them for flat work. I mean, if I'm building a patio.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, you can, if you want to, what would be the basis for denial?
If it.
If it's too close to the property line or something like that.
I mean,
If it was a raised deck, I think, but what if I was just gonna pour a piece of cement between my house and the property line, so I park my car incidentally in the side yard?
like my house, if I were to pour concrete between my house and my neighbor's house, every time it rained, I'd flood them. Because we're just that little bit of grade above, and our houses are so close together. I mean, I'd be worried about runoff, especially with the issues we have with our drainage.
So by issuing a building permit,
We can, plus, if somebody's pouring a driveway and we need drainage underneath that driveway, at least we can say, you need a culvert.
I'm not arguing, I'm not
Yeah.
questioning your practice, I'm just asking, you know.
Yeah.
I think because we have issues with that in town now where they've blocked up our ditches and then the water has nowhere to go and it just backs up.
Okay,
And then it backs up into other people's areas.
back to my question. Your setbacks are for structures, so are we considering flat work a structure?
No, not necessarily.
So how, so,
No.
but not, but Dave was saying that setbacks apply to flat work.
I guess I don't.
I'm just asking the question, I'm just.
Yeah, we don't because we let the driveway come out in front of the house.
So basically, we're saying flat work requires a building permit, but it's not subject to setback requirements unless it's 6 inches above the earth's surface or something like that.
wouldn't we need to do that on a case-by-case basis because of the way everything is?
So what's the
Built.
basis for approval and denial on that? I don't disagree, but you need to have some standards on when you say yay and when you say nay.
I think we have to work on that.
So when would it be appropriate to apply a setback from a driveway, sidewalk, patio?
I think we have to work on that.
I guess
I mean-
if you're putting a driveway out to the road in a boulevard, you definitely have to have it. So there was a culvert.
I would say a building permit for.
I'm fine,
Yeah,
I'm
I
fine
mean-
with your building permits, the question
Right, I'm just
is,
trying to figure out why you do it, I mean, but.
well, no,
It would have to have
the
a-
building permit, you can just say, flat work requires building permits, no big deal.
What if it comes too close to a neighbor's property? Like
That's
our,
my question.
No, that's what I meant.
so,
That's why you have to work on it. You have-
or
it-
neighbor's
case by case.
structure. Like our houses are super close together. I think we have like 9 feet between our houses. If I were to put concrete to my property line, it would be like 4 feet from their house. And it would probably come close to their sidewalk and
Their
every.
house is encroaching the side yard, so
Mhm.
their house
Well,
is
we
built-
both do.
So, yeah,
That's an 1900 house
Mhm.
that's next to her
Well, and ours was built in the, what, the 70s.
in the 70s.
So it's, I mean, it's,
it would be case by case basis.
Okay, so, but we're gonna come in and say, anybody that wants to build a house or pour some cement on the side of the house, and right now their house meets the setback of 7 feet, but the flat work is gonna encroach into that 7-foot setback. We're gonna require a variance every time?
I think that's the only time you should do a building permit, if for flat work, is if you're within the outside of your setbacks of your property, or if you're encroaching the boulevard. Other than that, what's the point?
Yeah, that makes
Okay,
sense.
say that again.
Flat work building permit should be required if you're approaching the boulevard.
You're gonna be
So
constructing
that-
it.
your drain-
Constructing in the right of way.
Or if you're, beyond your setbacks of your property.
So, alright, so anytime that anybody's building a side drive to access property in the back, they're gonna need a variance.
No, not necessarily variance.
Just a building
Yeah.
permit.
But no, we were just talking about,
No, they have to have a very.
they're married at the hip,
Yeah.
okay? I can't issue a building permit for something that does not conform with the zoning ordinance. If you're telling me that I have to be 7 feet for all structures, and we're considering flat work a structure, then anybody that pours a piece of cement 7 feet off the property line is gonna need a variance.
We don't wanna do that.
It's still,
That'll be-
I think case by case basis, because she's aware of what her neighbor's doing, she's aware of her house and so on. She's a polite neighbor. Then you're gonna have somebody else that's not a polite neighbor, and we, being stewards, we have to be,
Maybe what it is this, is that, anybody that wants to construct a poured slab in the side yard has to do so in a fashion that it runs to the front of the yard and not to the neighbors. Where which means I'm putting a 2-inch lip, I'm putting a 2-inch lip along the side, that's almost like a curb. And then that does not run onto your neighbor's yard, but it runs down towards the street to your drainage ditch.
What drainage ditch?
yeah.
If you have.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have plat maps? Because before I bought the place over on Cornell and Pelican, they did a survey.
Okay.
You should have a plat map, right?
The city should have a plat map.
Okay, because my neighbor, the lot's vacant. They tore the house down, but they just cut down a tree that is like half on my property.
Is the trunk on your property?
Half of it is.
Then you each own half, and so they decide they can
Yeah.
take care of that.
Didn't consult me, just cut the thing down and stump grinders there now. It's taking forever, but it's half on my property, as far as I know, from the original survey.
Yeah, it's like somebody builds a fence that's on the property line. Theoretically, if it's on the property line, it's a shared fence. If it deviates onto the other person's, then they can take that part of the fence down. So I'm gonna go back to this, we need to come up with some sort of a standard for flat work that encroaches yard requirements, right?
Yep.
So I'll come back with something, I'll need to think about that a little bit. I think I got something on the fly, but I wanna come back with that. Alright, so the other thing that we did here is we talked about showing, the lot width, the height, that sort of a thing. We then also are showing the setbacks that we showed in here, and then that then is then reflected in some diagrams that we're gonna show you, where the required setbacks are. This it would be a garage, which would be the accessory use, and then this kind of gives us an idea. So when somebody comes in and asks for a building permit, it looks much better than it does right here, because of the reflection. At least people can kind of see where they can and can't build and what we're measuring from. A little bit, I think it's a little bit more user friendly. For the, okay, then. Okay, this is just a little bit of something. What happens if, in this example, we have 2 houses, right? And let's just say this house here was, 3 feet off the property line, and then this guy wants to add a deck on, and he wants to be within 3 feet of the property line. So they're both non-conforming, but I don't care that the deck's gonna be right here, because then I can just walk out my house, I can walk onto his deck and we can sit down and have a beer, whatever, blah, 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 right? What if both neighbors agree that we're okay with each of us encroaching, as long as you still have at least a certain amount of distance, in case, I would recommend at least 8 feet. But what this does here is this little codicil says that the Board of Adjustment may allow side yards to be less than what's required, less than that 7 feet, provided that there's an easement between the two properties to allow the encroachment, and it's recorded at the County Register of Deeds, and at no point in time, and shall I, with it 2 times the minimum required, is 14 feet on the affected property. So it's okay for this one specific use, but we're not letting anything else get closer than that. You still have, everything else can be abide, but for this little piece, we're gonna allow that to happen, because I don't get to run that whole variance along the whole side yard along that property. I only get to apply that exception on what's encroaching your yard. Is that something that because this is useful in older parts of town where you have narrower lots and it allows some flexibility. Now the question is, you guys set the standard the first time you do it, that we're okay that both guys can put it up to the property line, probably not a good idea. But if, say, say my house is already 12 feet back from the side yard, and you want to encroach up to about 2 feet off your property line, well, we're still 10 feet apart. And as long as I'm okay with you encroaching, I don't have any plans ever of putting on an addition to the house that's going to encroach it, we record that easement on my property. That I'm the one that's, you're the one that's benefiting it, but I'm the one that's allowing, so I'm putting the easement on my property saying that I'm not going to encroach that side yard.
Well, can't you charge for an easement?
Yeah, easements can be charged, but in this situation, I think it's just something, that's what you have to negotiate to make it happen, but that's not a city issue, that's between the landowners.
Is that what happened with DeFreeze?
DeFreeze.
And their porch?
I know, it has variance.
We could do that, we do it this way, that way you're not having to go through a variance process as well.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? You're letting neighbors sort out the affairs. If the neighbors can't agree, I can still come back and then ask for a variance, and then the board gets involved.
No, when
And
you're
if
saying
I can't get the 2 neighbors to agree, then I think then it's really easy, you deny the variance because you stay out of that situation.
when you're saying the whole property line,
This may be a better way of explaining it. This house, let's just pretend this house is 10 feet off that property line, so he's got 3 feet to give. And this thing is already, only 5 feet off, and they want to add 3 feet. I'm encroaching this space, which is encroaching my neighbor's space. But if my neighbor doesn't care, he can give me an easement to encroach this, and we still have at least 14 feet of different space between us, and we don't have to come to the board for a variance. It's just a tool in the toolbox that you probably aren't
Are
going to
you
use.
gonna provide me with verbiage that I
Oh,
can
yeah.
do?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What this does is it just allows the neighbors to talk, to work out an arrangement that the city, now if you guys can't, then you come to the city council and the zoning board. I would turn around and deny it, because if the neighbors aren't gonna work out, why do you wanna jump in the middle of that, right? But I'll come back with another drawing, give you a better explanation of how that works, but I would recommend having it just, you maybe will only use it once every 3 or 4 years or something like that, but it's just something where you can take care of it, and we don't have to add it to the process, and then you're not variancing things. And when you start variancing things, it starts relaxing things way too much. So that is basically, let's take a quick look. That's basically the R1 zone, which again, is a very large part of the community that we've got, and I think we'll come back and talk about the garage and those storage unit issues, but I think I got a pretty good idea. I'll come back with a flat work policy that could be at least amenable to most of you. What we're going to do next time, because it's getting close to 7, I know you have a regular agenda, and I think we're going to talk about the R2 district, and there's a few small, not a lot of substantive changes, And I'd like to get through the R3. Again, I don't see a lot of changes, it's mostly your manufactured housing court. If there's something that we want to do different there. And then it's just talking, I think there's a good chance that we can get through the 2 residentials and at least one of the commercial districts next time. And if we can say, look at that for our September, then realistically, industrial, then we'll probably have a couple meetings talking about supplemental regulations. I'm still thinking around Christmas time, we'll have a lot of the ordinance covered, which then will help me do the other stuff on the backfill. Now, your next regularly scheduled meeting would be Labor Day. Are you planning on meeting on Labor Day?
We usually try to do that.
Do you go the week later or that same week?
Sometimes
Same
Wednesdays is usually the same
Let
way.
me pull up my.
We have done it the next week, but we've also done it on a Wednesday or a Tuesday afterwards.
Let me see what my wife and my secretary asked me.
See what your wife said?
Well, my wife and my secretary, I don't ever add anything to my agenda. They're the ones that they control my life. So, let's just see. I just want to see what September is.
So when do you guys want to do it?
I'm going Labor Day.
Yeah, me too. I said I'm gone Labor Day.
What have you guys done in the past?
Tuesday or Wednesday that week would work for me. I'm fine right now. And
Wednesday the 4th?
and I'm wide open that following. Actually,
Or Tuesday.
whatever you say, I can make
What about
work
Tuesday?
right now. Bob.
We'll make a motion to approve.
Wednesday the
Wednesday
4th.
4th.
Oh, what about Tuesday?
No,
Well, I guess that settled that.
not for me anyway. You can do it.
Wednesday okay for you?
Sure.
Like a heavy day at work?
Yeah, I just have to find daycare. It's fine.
Is that your long day?
Yes.
Oh.
And I have to find a babysitter. It's fine. Grandma to the rescue.
I'll tell my wife she can babysit for you.
Right.